Larry Fine owed his career to childhood trauma. Joseph Feinberg was a Russian immigrant in Philadelphia who ran a jewelry shop. He was 24 when his first son, Louis, was born. Back in those days, jewelers determined whether something was real gold by rubbing it on a non-porous stone, which would leave a mark, and then covering it in nitric acid, which won't dissolve gold. If the mark disappeared, it was fake gold. If the mark stayed, the carat purity of the gold was determined by applying various concentrations of hydrochloric acid, which will dissolve gold. Side note, this is where the phrase passing the acid test comes from. Second side note, if I pass your acid test, please consider subscribing. But back to Feinberg. So we've determined that he had some hydrochloric acid laying around, and that's the bad one, the one that's involved in all the acid attacks you Google when you're feeling morbidly curious. One day when 4-year-old Louis was hanging around with his dad in the shop, he mistook the acid for soda pop and picked up the bottle to take a drink. When his father Joseph saw this happening, he knocked the bottle out of the boy's hand, saving his face, probably his life, but it caused the acid to spill. And some of it spilled on Larry's right arm, burning him bad enough to eat away the skin and fat and do some serious damage to the muscles underneath. Joseph rushed Larry to the hospital where, according to the story as told by Larry's brother, the first doctor suggested amputation. Second opinions are good. Another doctor performed surgery to repair the arm and covered the wound with skin grafts. During his rehabilitation, it was suggested that Larry take violin lessons to strengthen the muscles in his damaged arm. Supposedly, the back and forth motion while gripping the bow was exactly the exercise he needed, and it must have been true because he made a full recovery with hardly any scarring. When you see the rare odd photo of Larry in short sleeves or shirtless, you'd have a heck of a time trying to find the graft site. Anyway, starting violin at the tender age of 4 made Larry a really good musician. By the time he was a teenager, his parents wanted to send him to music school, but then World War I got in the way. As an adult, he started playing violin on the vaudeville circuit, where he took up the stage name Larry Fine. And in March of 1928, he was the master of ceremonies at Chicago's Rainbow Gardens, performing an act involving playing the violin and doing that crazy Russian dance where they kick and look like they're sitting down, and that drew the attention of Shemp Howard and Ted Healy. Healy asked Larry to replace Shemp in his act Ted Healy and his Stooges while Shemp was away on other business. And for $90 a week, Larry took the job as a stooge alongside the other two stooges, Bobby Pincus and Sam Moody Braun. What about Moe and Curly? Curly didn't join the Stooges until 1932, and Moe had retired from show business to go into real estate in 1925. And at the time, Ted Healy had a habit of changing his stooges around, just like he had a habit of changing the name of the act. Ted Healy and his Stooges, Ted Healy and his Southern Gentlemen, Ted Healy and his Racketeers. But 8 months after Larry joined the Stooges, Moe and Shemp, who were the original Stooges, were back into the act, and in 1929, the trio of Larry, Moe, and Shemp were together for the first time. In 1930, the team made a movie called Soup to Nuts, which wasn't a hit, but the Stooges were good enough for the Fox Film Corporation to offer them their own contract without Healy. But Healy blocked that deal, telling the Fox execs that the Stooges were his employees, and the offer was withdrawn. When they found out what Healy had done, the Stooges left to do their own vaudeville act and landed a movie contract in 1933 with MGM, and then a better movie contract in 1934 with Columbia Pictures. And the rest is history. Louis Feinberg was known as Larry Fine for the rest of his career until his last film in 1970, Kook's Tour. Sadly, he had a stroke while filming that movie. He then spent the rest of his years in a retirement community in Woodland Hills until he died in 1975. He was a household name because of the Stooges. He was a stooge because of his career in vaudeville. He was in vaudeville because he loved to entertain and could play the violin. He could play the violin because of a terrible accident in his childhood. Probably a lesson in there somewhere. I'm Christopher. You're great. Thanks for watching, and stay out of the comfort zones.